But welcome everyone to this webinar, the first of the series of webinars on ISO standards for non-sewered sanitation. This is a webinar being conducted in partnership of Center for Water Sanitation at CEPT University, the Global Center of Excellence for Sanitation at the IIT Palakkad, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So on behalf of all three of us, three organizers of this webinar, we welcome you all. I would request Roshan ji, if you are around, to give your welcome remarks. Roshan, please put, yes, go ahead, Roshan ji.
Hello, thank you, Dinesh. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know which time zone you are in. Very nice to see you all in this virtual webinar. Very much excited to listen from the colleague May, Sean, Leslie, and Jyoti ji as expert to understand about this standard. So as you know, the ISO standard related to non-sewered sanitation is now becoming a very much important, the topic that coming up, because in last couple of years, we are really promoting non-sewered sanitation because non-sewered sanitation is becoming one of the critical option for to achieve the proper sanitation services to the entire world. And because a lot of developing countries still they don't have that sewer system, so non-sewered sanitation is going to be much more important. At the same time, it is not easy because it needs a lot of standard related to quality, service level standard, and so on. And those standards doesn't exist in most of the developing countries. And thanks to the international standard organization, who really came up with a different standard that will help to bring this non-sewered sanitation system in quality way, and the service level standard will be maintained by the authority. But the problem here is, although there are several standards like the ISO 24521, ISO 30500, or ISO 31800, all exist, but the very limited stakeholders know about standard. And also they don't know how to really implement that standard in the country where that standard already approved by their respective standard organization. So this webinar will help to really give the idea that what are the standards and what are the limitations, how can we really move forward. We are really looking forward to listening from our expert from different countries. So I really welcome all the expert colleagues, and also I'm very much grateful with the CEPT CWAS team and also Global Sanitation Center of Excellency, IIT Palakkad, for hosting this event. I am sure this is not only one time. There will be a series of this kind of webinar will be running in coming days or months. I would really like to join in all those events. And over to you, colleagues. Looking forward to.
Thank you, Roshan ji. Dr. Anuradha Shankar, please, your remarks.
Welcome everyone to this wonderful program being hosted by CWAS has done most of the work. I should not take any credit for it, but having said that, Global Sanitation Center of Excellence in IIT Palakkad has 4 pillars. We start with ideation and incubation of startups, testing, field trials, and making sure that they adhere to the standards, various standards, what you're going to listen here, as well as we're trying to come up with standards for biosolids and reuse in India, and training for maintenance and service personnel across the startups, as well as reinvent toilet technology that we are trying to bring into the country. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a way of introduction, we can see that over 200 50 people have registered, people are still joining. And many of them have the question, what are ISO standards? So even, in simple terms, ISO standards are a description of a process that tells you exactly the best way of doing something, whether it's a product, whether it's a process, whether it's a service delivery. So that is what ISO standards are all about. What we have attempted for you is to use a video from the ISO website that briefly describes what ISO standards are. So please show that video just on the ISO standard.
We live in an amazing world, full of incredible opportunities and endless possibilities. But it can also be a complex and overwhelming place. When things don't work as they should, it often means that standards are absent. But when ISO standards are applied, life is just so much richer. ISO standards help to make the world a safer, cleaner, and more efficient place. From food safety to computers, from healthcare to new technologies. There are many challenges facing our environment, economy, and society. ISO can make a positive difference to all our lives, utilizing a wealth of international experience and wisdom. In today's ever-changing world, ISO standards help create growth, open up global markets, and make trade fairer, including for developing countries. ISO standards can help tackle global challenges like climate change, road safety, energy, and social responsibility. ISO standards touch almost everything we do, keeping us connected and entertained, making us more productive, more creative, sharing ideas, promoting innovation, and keeping us safe and healthy. ISO is the world's largest developer of voluntary international standards, with over 18,000 standards for nearly every aspect of technology and business. For over 60 years, a network of standards bodies in 163 countries, working in partnership around the world and right here at home. ISO builds confidence for today, for tomorrow, and for the future.
Okay, so that's the general background of what the ISO standards are. And you saw at the end of the video, the website. So all the standards that we will talk about today, if you want to deep dive into that, please visit that website for further details on each of these standards. So we will start, and as we said at the beginning, this is the first of the series of 4 webinars where we will describe various ISO standards for non-sewered sanitation. And today's description will be largely on ISO 30500. So, but we will, and the other standard, and the ISO 30500 and ISO 31800. We will describe the other standards in other sessions as we go along. I would now like to welcome Ms. Leslie McDermott. Leslie is working with the ANSI, American National Standard Institution. She's had many years of experience. She is their Chief of International Development Activities and has been helping ANSI and ISO standards to propagate in the developing countries. She oversees the ANSI China program, which brings together the technical, business, and policy leaders to find solutions to the issues related to. And she holds a master's degree in international relations from University of London and a bachelor's degree from Boston University. And she's certified as a project management professional. Over to you, Leslie, please.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. I'd like to thank the organizers very much for including me. And as mentioned, I come from the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI. So while my slides are being loaded, I will just give a quick overview. I am planning to cover a little bit of background during this first webinar on the process used to develop several of the ISO standards that are the focus of your whole webinar series. So I will keep the information at a relatively high level background on ISO and the process used to develop ISO standards, as well as the participation that we saw in the development of these, so that you have that background when you learn and hear more from experts about the technical contents and the uses of the standard. Are my slides going to be loaded? Great, thank you. You can go to the next slide. So to start, so you know where I am coming from in our perspective, the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, is the coordinator of the standards and conformity assessment activities in the USA. The organization is a private sector nonprofit organization, and we were founded about 105 years ago. So in that history, ANSI has focused on process and consensus and representation to lead both standards for the US and representing internationally. Importantly, ANSI is not a government agency or a standards developer, but we are the official US member to ISO and via the US National Committee to the IEC, which is another international standards developer. So in that context, as US member to ISO, ANSI partnered with the national standards body of Senegal, ASN, and we jointly served as the secretariat for the two ISO committees that developed ISO 30500 and 31800. So that is our experience in the process. And next slide. At the beginning of the process, when we were exploring what makes the most sense for the reinvented toilet technology and non-sewered sanitation sector more broadly, the question came up of why a standard. There are a lot of ways to achieve technological development and acceleration of the deployment of those technologies. But at ANSI and in the international standards community, we really see standards as a tool to help a sustainable economy in any sector, really. But when it comes to sustainable sanitation in particular, standards can really help facilitate innovation, break down trade barriers, help conserve water and achieve the SDGs, and spur economic empowerment. And standards do this by providing a common language and set of requirements that everyone can understand. And through the process, collecting input and feedback from a wide variety of stakeholders early so that the standard represents the best information from the sector and from all countries that are affected. Next slide, please. Standards also enable our communities to streamline sanitation services and protect health and sustainable community development. So this is just further reinforcing standards play a crucial role in economic development and communities. And for the sanitation services, they really help through product standards, through process standards, help to streamline the service delivery for the sanitation sector. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk a little bit more about ISO as an organization. First and foremost, ISO is a network of national standards bodies. So the ISO members from 163 countries, as you heard in the video, all participate on technical committees. And those national standards bodies engage in due process and stakeholder engagement within their countries to attract industry, government, academia, consumers, and really anyone who could be materially affected by a standard to participate in their domestic process. And those experts, together with the members from the other countries around, throughout ISO's network, jointly develop both ISO policies and standards. So when you hear about ISO standards once they're published, this is who really participates. It's all the experts participating through their national standards bodies from all around the world. And depending on the standards that are being developed, the members in charge or leading the committees will usually make an effort to make sure that the most relevant countries that could be affected by the standard participate. And that is something we definitely did for ISO PC 305 and 318, the two committees that developed these non-sewered sanitation standards, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So keep this network in mind when hearing about the standards and how they were developed. It was not just a closed group of individuals from one country or a small group of countries. There's really a wide process and stakeholder engagement that goes behind each ISO committee. Next slide, please. Similarly, the process involved in developing an ISO standard is rigorous and has a number of defined deliverables and steps to reach. So each ISO committee has to follow this set of 6 steps that are summarized in this graphic. I know it's a little bit small, but essentially there are stages that the committee needs to move a draft document through. And the whole committee votes to move to each next stage. So in between, there are drafting working groups, and there are meetings to discuss any comments. And each member of the committee has the opportunity to submit those comments. So while the process is defined and held up through a rigorous process from ISO and the members and the Secretariat, there is stakeholder feedback and consensus built into each step. And the ultimate result is the publication of an international standard as an ISO document. It gets a number like ISO 30500, and the document is then made available for public use. Next slide. So taking the first ISO PC that developed 30500, one of the first standards of focus for the webinar, I've laid out a couple of highlights from the timeline of that committee just to give you a sense how that process was applied for this one committee. And it began in 2016 with the initial proposal for the standard being circulated to all ISO member bodies. So even establishing the committee gets reviewed by all ISO members to agree with the need and the scope of the proposed ISO standard. So that was achieved, and in 2016, the PC 305 was created and immediately began work. So by the beginning of 2017, after just one meeting, or after 1 year, the PC had met once, and the working group had also met once to develop the draft. Next slide. The timeline for PC 305 was very aggressive, and the steps were moved through quickly, but each step was still achieved. So you can see here all of the meetings that took place through to 2017 and 2018, leading to the eventual publication of the ISO 30500 in October of 2018. And to give you some context, that puts it at not quite 3 years since the initial proposal, and about 2 years since the first meeting of the committee to publishing of a standard. And that is quite accomplished for an ISO committee to do the work that quickly and to achieve the consensus. The final draft international standard stage is one that is included in order to make sure that all extra feedback is considered in the development of the standard. So that's an example of how even during a quick timeline, the committee was very efficient with its work and took every step to make sure that feedback was included. And then, since standards are living tools for the industry, ISO has a requirement that all ISO standards are reviewed every 5 years for their relevance, and it's decided whether or not the standard is still accurate and complete as written, or whether it needs to be revisited. And this year being 5 years since the publication of ISO 30500, during the review, it was decided that some updates would be welcome and needed. So the PC 305 has reformed as of June of this year and has already begun the process of updating ISO 30500. Next slide, please. So this map shows the countries that were participating in the first PC 305 back in 2018. So as you can see, there's a diverse representation from around the world, and in particular in the countries that would most benefit from using the technologies covered by ISO 30500. Next slide, please. So in general, ISO standards are technical solutions, and the 3 standards that are of interest to this webinar series, ISO 30500, 24521, and 31800, all have different purposes within the broader sanitation system and the sector. So just to summarize very briefly for my presentation, ISO 30500 contains specifications for a household toilet product. So it's a product standard containing specifications for this specific household toilet product. ISO 24521 contains specifications in a management system standard to optimize and improve existing on-site domestic wastewater services and their component parts. So this standard is for utilities and sanitation service providers to help optimize their processes. And ISO 31800 is again a product standard, but it contains the criteria and specifications for fecal sludge treatment units, so at the community scale. So those are the very high level distinctions between the standards. I'm not going to show a video now, but I did want to mention that there is a video, several videos, in fact, on ANSI's website, sanitation.ansi.org. And it includes an explanation of sanitation standards that builds on the video played from ISO's website in the beginning. And it also includes some videos on the specific standards, very easy to understand language about what the standards are. So if these slides are made available after the fact, this will include a direct link. Next slide. So since the publication of ISO 30500 and 31800, ANSI has been working with the other partners involved and users and practitioners to encourage the effective use of these standards so that they can be widely used in the sector. And the key point that we have been emphasizing is that looking at these standards together can help optimize existing services in a country while also encouraging the development of new technology. So as I mentioned, with 24521 focusing on existing services and optimizing those, and 30500 being a standard for an innovative product, if a country rather is at the early stages or any stage in reviewing the standards it has adopted and in place for sanitation services, these two together, they are not in conflict, but really work together to help bring the sanitation sector forward and encourage a clean sanitation. Next slide, please. So in that vein, many countries have adopted nationally ISO 30500 and 24521. and that number is growing. So we continue to monitor and check with countries on the progress. And this just means that the standard has been adopted by the national standards body. And in some places that is a requirement for a product to use a standard to enter the market. And in other cases, it just enables further awareness nationally of the standard and how it protects against pathogens and protects human health and safety. Next slide, please. So that is about all I have for my presentation. Here is the link again to ANSI's website with training materials, videos, information about all the standards that have been discussed. And you can also find contact information for ANSI if you want to learn more. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to take questions when appropriate.
Yeah, thank you. And what I suggest to the audience is that there is a chat here. If you are familiar with Zoom, it is at the bottom of your screen. So please put your questions, comments to the presenters or in general in the chat. Our team is reviewing these chats, and after the presentation, all the 4 presentations are over, we will have about half hour of discussion. So we can then take up these questions. By now, in the presentation, Ms. McDermott referred to the PC 305. So we now go to the chair of the PC 305, Mr. Son Kim, who is going to tell us about the 30500 and the process of, because he's now reviewing these standards. So he will tell us a little more about what is being reviewed and how it is being adopted in. Over to you, Mr. Kim.
Great, thank you. Yeah, my name is Sun Kim, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you all and to be with all the partners that have been involved in the development of these ISO standards, as well as really the important part of implementing the standards, using the standards. And so because this is just an introductory session, we're not going to do a deep dive into these standards, but just a shameless plug for future 3 webinars. We will go into a deep dive into these three important standards. So with that, if you could start the presentation, and I'll go through. Yeah, you can, when it comes up, if you can just go to the next.
Exactly.
I'm sorry? Yep. Next slide, please. Yeah. Can you go to the next slide, please? So since we're here to talk about standards, the gold standard, if you think about sanitation, everyone thinks of the flush toilet as the gold standard, and everyone is waiting for.
Very nice meeting you. All right, take care. Bye.
Yeah, sorry, I'm hearing some feedback. So if everyone who's not speaking could mute their phone, that'd be awesome. So yeah, so this is the gold standard, and of course, where the outputs from a human evacuation goes, it's always problematic, and so there are costs to implement sewered solutions, but there's also dangers if the sewered solution basically has no treatment at the end, or if the treatment is non-functional. And even when sewer sanitation is put into place, oftentimes it serves a very small population. Even in the US, sewer sanitation covers 70–80% of households, but there are a number of households that do rely on non-sewer sanitation. And let me take a quick break from talking about sanitation, which will be the rest of the conversation. And the term, the gold standard, I think everyone understands what gold is and the value, and the term standard, it implies that there's a mutual understanding that everyone more or less understands what that standard is. And that's the whole point of a standard is that even though standards are oftentimes written in different languages, especially an international standard like an ISO standard, has meaning that is consensus driven, and the vast majority of people understand what it means. So the meaning is consistent, less prone to differences in interpretation, not language interpretation, but understanding what it means. So with that, I think that's a key element, is that a standard really, we bat the word around easily, but that it has a very specific meaning. And it's important when we think about virtually anything, and particularly when we think about sanitation. So next slide. So we've talked about the gold standard. If we go to the next slide. So non-sewer sanitation today, these are just some examples. You could have a simple pit latrine. You could have septic systems, and typically septic systems with a drain field. So biological degradation treatment, and then drain field. But this requires a lot of money, a lot of effort, and also a lot of land to be able to do this type of drainage. So oftentimes septic tanks in many countries are just holding tanks that then just needs to be pumped out, and but oftentimes just overflows into the environment. And then of course there's open defecation, which we all recognize is not a humane solution. And so all of these, whether they seem cheap at the beginning or at the end, all have costs, and also impact to the environment, impact to human health. So these are elements that need to be addressed, and that's the idea behind the standard. So a quick, yeah, thank you. Next slide. Yeah. So this is just, I think everyone on the call recognizes the sanitation service chain, whether it's sewered or whether it's non-sewered fecal sludge management. So we'll overlay how different standards play into this, using this the service chain, particularly for non-sewer sanitation. So next slide. So Leslie had mentioned several different standards. So ISO 24521 and its family of standards is related to the guidelines of how to manage in a way that is beneficial to the service provider, but also to the customers of the fecal sludge management supply chain, service chain. And so ISO 24521 has great examples and guidelines for how to properly document the processes, as well as how to actually more efficiently and run such a business. And at the end of ISO 24521, there's actually even examples of existing non-sewer sanitation treatment systems. And then ISO 31800, so ISO 24521 covers the entire service chain. ISO 31800 is a specific product standard that covers the areas of at the community scale, the fecal sludge treatment units. So this is a case where the containment has occurred, the extraction, desludging, and transportation to a site for proper treatment. And when we talk about treatment, we're talking about where the human enteric pathogens, the germs that causes such horrendous impact to human health, diarrhea, a lot of other diseases, oftentimes death. In fact, I understand that there's hundreds of thousands of individuals that die from preventable diseases because of the fecal oral transmission of human waste. So that's the summary of ISO 31800. And again, these will be covered in more details. So the ISO 30500, which I'll concentrate on at this point, really is a product standard that takes the fecal sludge management chain and collapses it all into one product. So basically, it is a aspirational, typically flush toilet that accepts, contains, and fully treats, all in that same unit. And the key is that this system needs to be attractive to the user, aspirational, and also kill all the pathogens, and also address the environmental pollutants in order to make sure that these systems, compliant systems, do everything that wastewater treatment plant sewer sanitation, which is from the flush toilet all the way to the conveyance, all the way to the treatment, and all the way to the discharge, all are safe. Now it's a big hairy dream, but the reality of it is that these products are actually available at the community scale and soon to be available at the household scale. And the key will be to drive down the cost so that they become ubiquitous, so that anyone, even the poor, whether in developing countries or developed countries, can reasonably afford to purchase and to use these toilet and treatment systems. So let's go into a little bit more detail into ISO 30500. So it defines the design, performance, and test requirements of these on-site toilet and treatment systems. It is technology neutral, but it does have to kill all the pathogens and reduce the human environmental pollutants. And these are the next elements are things that a user could easily see or sense. Odor, noise, easy to clean, not seeing the feces and urine of the prior user. Those are things that are easily evaluated by a user, but this requires the developers and the manufacturers of these toilets to actually design this in. And so this is a case where these are prefabricated household or community scale toilets and integrated treatment systems that treat for human health and safety, for pathogens, pollutants, emissions, usability, every aspect. Now, that element, you can see when the liquid that comes out of the system is dirty, but it can oftentimes be clear and yet contain a lot of pathogens or other pollutants. So this is a case where, excuse me, where there are methods to test to ensure that these systems are in fact pathogen-free and that reduces and is safe for discharge into the environment. This also defines a system that does not require connection to a network sewer system. and possibly even no connection to water, where a lot of the systems I'm familiar with actually recycles the water, the effluent, makes it clean enough, safe enough that it can actually be used to reflush over and over and over for months on end. So that's the dream, is that you have an aspirational toilet that typically flush toilets that actually saves water. In fact, in the U.S., there's quite a big organization that is very interested in these toilets, because the U.S., parts of the U.S. has massive droughts, and a problem isolated to developing countries only, but it is really impacting all the countries. And so if you could go back to the prior slide, sorry, I think I got a signal that my network might not be stable, so I apologize if you missed some of that. But in the end, the compliant products that are tested to these requirements of ISO 30500 are also expected to address most, if not all, local and national regulations. So the idea is that ISO 30500 compliant systems will need very little or no modifications or testing in order to be used in any country throughout the world. So next slide. So if you look at the lower left quadrant, implementation of quality standards, this is the whole point of the ISO standards and what we're aiming for. And it really is one part of many aspects that need to be in place. So the enabling environment is that, in fact, these systems need to be affordable. So it's great if you have systems that do all of this great stuff, but if it's not affordable, it means it will not become readily available for everyone. And this really is a human rights issue that really needs to address in an aspirational way for everyone, not just the rich, not just the middle class, but the poor as well. And then there's also, if you can go back to the standards do also feed into a supportive regulatory environment, because they can be used within regulations that are recognizing as positive solutions as one of many possible solutions for addressing this. And of course, we really do need these affordable, available, competitive products. So with that, I will end, but we can also take questions at the end. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Soon. And I apologize, I forgot to introduce you properly to the audience. And Mr. Kim has about 10 years of experience at the Gates Foundation, where he was the senior program manager in charge of developing standards for this, what they call their reinventing toilet program. But more interestingly, his career, 28 years at the Boeing factory in Seattle, where he worked on product development. So I think he brought a lot of technical knowledge and information to the work that he did on this. And we're looking at affordable, as he mentioned, toilet that we can all have in our homes very soon. So thank you. I can see lots of questions coming up on the chat. We will keep them, and please also, Mr. Kim and Leslie, keep looking at the chat to see if you can respond to some questions. We now want to go to Nepal, a country that has actually implemented some of these ISO standards in adopting, not implementing, but adopting this standard. And Ms. Jyoti Joshi. She is the Deputy Director at the Nepal Bureau of Standards. And we want to hear from her, Jyoti ji, about what was the process that the country adopted to implement or to adopt these standards. So, Jyoti ji, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, I am just sharing our experience, how we implement these standards in our country. Yeah, can you share my presentation?
Yes, we.
Yeah, let me share our experience and learning of ISO 24521 and 30500 adoption process in Nepal. Yes, we are a national standard body as well as national certification. We are a certification body as well as we are a NMI, National Meteorological Institute. So commonly we are known as NBSM. This is a Nepal Bureau of Standard and Metrology. We work under Ministry of Industry, Trade, Commerce and Supplies as one of the department. It is a government body, and we have work with the yes-1 Act, Certification Mark Act, where we have one council which we called as a National Standard Council. This council give us the authority, and this council pass that is finally adopt our standards. Yes, I am sharing just our experience, what we have doing past years from the establishment of this national standard body. So that is the first stage is a proposal stage that we are focused on the different areas, some for the facilitation type, some for the that is trade facilitation. We are focused on the product which are that is a nature-based product in Nepal. That is mostly we are making the that is product standard which we have in Nepal, like essential oils, like natural mineral water, like that. And for the most of the things we adopt, we totally adopt, or sometimes we slightly modified standards from the ISO standards. So we have a different stage, proposal stage, and then we have a preparatory stage. And in this preparatory stage, we formulate the technical committee where we have stakeholders from the different organization. Mostly we invite the relevant stakeholder, like for water things, we invited from the Ministry of Water, Department of Water, Sanitation, and the NGOs and INGOs which are working in Nepal in the sector, like info. Just we have for the implementation of these standards. We have one of very good partner, info, which is supporting for the implementation of these standards. After adoption, they are implementing these in a certain our local level, local governments. And then we make a committee, and we have a inquiry stage, and finally we approve these standards from the National Standard Council as per Nepal Certification Mark Act. So after this things, this becomes Nepal standards, and mostly we published it as a NS/ISO standards. We did standard publication and adoption for this both standards. Next slide, please. Yeah, types of standardization projects for national adoption of ISO standards. Yes, I already mentioned you that sometimes we directly adopt the standards, like in 24521, we adopted it on 2016. That was for activities relating to drinking water and wastewater services, guideline for management of basic on-site domestic wastewater service was adopted through this type of project. That was the identical adoption. But for the in the second case, for the 30500, we did yes, we found it a very interesting standard. Yes, it can be used in a remote country like Nepal. We have many tourists in the places. It's very lack of very interesting for Nepal to have this type of product specification, where we can, if we have this type of product, this is a one-time cost, but we think this will be very fruitful. These technologies will be very fruitful country like us. So we wanted to know about this standard to our relevant stakeholder from the municipalities, from other related ministries. So we do the lot of stakeholder meetings for this ISO standard with the help of this your reputed Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as from the ANFO team. Yeah, we have an expert group. Yes, our people took part in the making process of this standard, and finally we passed this standard from our technical committee. But now, yes, we came to know that this is for the ongoing process after this 5 years, as per ISO's this strategy. This is going to be revised. So let us see how can we do further for this standard. But it is adopted from the this standard committee. This is the almost final stage. So our key achievement is national adoption of the ISO 24521 guidelines, and national adoption is almost done. I just mentioned here ongoing. This is almost done. Our let us think what to do. Let's forward it to the National Standard Council, or wait for a new version. This is to be discussed separately with this ISO PC committee, as our people are all also in a working group. We have an expert team from our country. They are going to join, I think, meeting in the October in Brazil, I think so. They will tell us how to do further. Is it good to adopt in good to have a NS Nepal standard as it is, or we have to wait for it? Let's see. So just I want to show you some pictures and our stakeholder meetings. This is the formation of technical committee in NBSM. This is technical committee formed and introduced. These actually these committees are the people who look on the page by page, line by line, do it is implementable in Nepal or not, being a developing country, being a remote country, we have facilities and other things are not. Yes, we do the serious meetings, discussion, and as we are sure we can implement this in our context, and only then we adopt this as a ISO standard. So we have as like a ISO strategy, we have a technical committee and some committees, subcommittees. So we do the like the same. Yes, we have stakeholders for these things, and we have applied that system in one of our municipality, Mahalakshmi municipality. So just these are the same things. Key process of national adoption of ISO 24521 and 30500. That's we public it in our website for the recommendation for public comment. That is our 102 Assembly of Nepal Standard Council announced the approval of the guideline. this is the milestone for us. Yes, we just yes, we passed it as a Nepal standard. Now it becomes the Nepal standard NS ISO 24521. And this 30500 in final approval process from NBSM Council. Yeah, experience and learning from ISO 24521 is, yes, we need a lot of support and technical knowledge for these things. Yes, we are lucky to take part in this type of meetings, and thank you to the this foundation. This year also our people are going to join this technical meeting, so this meeting will gonna help to strengthen our people's technical capabilities, technical capability for these third world countries, developing countries, where the sanitation is a big challenge, big problem to overcome. Yes, this is good for us that NBSM was participating member in TC 224. Yes, that is, I already mentioned, ours is very open type of discussion. We do discuss with the relevant government bodies, central bodies, local bodies. We have academia, research organization, water testing laboratory organization, that is the relevant stakeholders in this part. Yes, NBSM participated actively in the preparation of this standard, with a thank you to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with the logistic support from you. Yes, our third plenary meeting of the project was held in Nepal in Kathmandu 2018, as earlier presenter also mentioned in her presentation. Though Nepal had participated in preparation of a standard, the need for evaluation of this standard was felt by stakeholder for a discussion in a wider group, which would also serve the purpose of sanitization, sensitization and awareness on this very important subject of sanitation and related to majority of population. A series of discussion was held in TC and STC on technical and other details of the standard. Yes, finally TC has for identical adoption of the standard, and now it becomes the national standard. Being a developed country, we are also getting chance by this foundation to take part in this type of meeting and adopt this, and that is testing and evaluating these things in our local level. So we hope in coming days we will have this ISO 30500 product in Nepal, so that we can install this product in our remote areas where people can use without water or less amount of water, so that it's very easy to handle the things with care. Yes, this is a implementation of ISO 24521. Mahalakshmi municipality is the first municipality in Nepal to endorse and implemented fecal sludge management bylaws and regulatory framework for safely management sanitation. It is also the first municipality in Nepal to establish and implement integrated municipal information system, which facilitates the municipality in planning, management, and these things. So thank you for this small presentation. So we hope in coming days we will learn more and share the things which we learned till now. So thank you, stakeholders, and thank you the team for giving us an opportunity to share our learnings. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti ji. Excellent presentation to show how, because there were some comments on the chat saying how a country like Zimbabwe can adopt this, and I think you have provided them the answers as to how country like Zimbabwe can also follow the route that Nepal had. There have been a couple of comments about whether the slides will be available. Of course, the slide presentation will be available. Yes. We will, at the end of the this webinar, and subject to the concurrence of all the presenters, we will consolidate all the slides. Sure. And we will upload them onto a web page where each of you can access this, where you have registered. All those registered for this webinar will be given the link where you can download the presentation. So thank you, Jyoti ji. And now we move to our last presentation. Ms. Mai Chen, Yi Chen. She's a senior program officer at TVU SUD. The organization does a lot of certification and testing, and she's been involved in testing certification of the non-sewered projects. And so we are very eager to learn about how they do this testing and certification of the product. So there is, and I think you may have seen on the chat somebody who has a prototype. So maybe he or she can approach you and see how the certification of various prototypes can be done. But at a later stage, right now, over to you, Mike, for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Dinesh, for the excellent introduction. And thank you, everyone, whether it's good morning, or good evening, or good afternoon to you. Thank you for taking the time out to attend this webinar. My name is Mei, and I with TUSUD. In case you don't know what TUSUD as an organization, what we do, TUSUD is a testing, inspection, and certification company, a third party. We call it TIC for short, TIC company. And a brief background how TUSUD got involved with the ISO standards for non-sewered sanitation. It all started a few years, 6, 7, 8 years ago. And the foundation, we realized that with emerging innovative technologies, non-sewered sanitation technologies coming into the market, there is no international standard to help this technology to know what is good enough. You know, whether my system is good enough for treating the effluent or solid. So we got a grant from the foundation, and we started working alongside while technologies are still in the development stage, and develop the ISO standard together. So earlier on, Leslie had already shared the whole process, and then Sun had shared also very briefly about ISO 3500, what the scope was, and ISO 31800. So maybe without further ado, could you show my slide, please, Jiganesh? I also realized that there are a couple of slides that has animation without the automation. So when I say click, could you just tap the space bar for me for the animation to come on? Thank you very much for that. Next slide, please. Okay, this forward-looking standard, the reason why I highlighted this sentence is exactly what I shared earlier. We call it the forward-looking standard because in normal times, standards are developed when the products are out in the market and people needed some sort of benchmarking. So a standard is created. For ISO 3500 and 31800, we develop when the technologies are also in the development stage. And what that means is that there are certain challenges that we face while we're developing the standard, but it's also a very forward-looking standard that we take into consideration about the latest technologies that are coming in for the fecal sludge treatment. And you have seen the slide 3500 talks about an on-site residential use treatment plus treatment. The key thing about being able to test for 3500 to those who have systems out there is that if you have to treat your effluent and solid on the spot, 100% treatment. If you have to discharge it and move it somewhere else for treatment, then it falls outside the scope of 3500. And for 31800, it's a community size, and it's like the replacement of wastewater treatment plant as non-sewered. And resource recovery, energy independent are some of the key criteria, key features of such treatment unit. Next slide. Click, please. Click. Thank you. And international standards are key to the progression of new sanitation technology and developing an industry to save lives. So this was a statement made by the ISO Secretary General Sergio Mujica. And I think, you know, he said that because for the longest time, we have no other options except for flush toilet or a pit latrine. So the last few years, what the foundation and the community has been doing is really develop to pave the path for an industry that helps to save lives. Next slide, please. Okay, so today, as mentioned earlier by a couple of speakers, it's not a deep dive into the two standards. I'm giving an overview of ISO 3500 and 31800 from a technical perspective, and I may not be also sharing some of the this is also not the intent space to share the learning lessons. I think that will be done in the deep dive. So essentially in ISO 3500, it's categorized into system if you only have the backend only. So what that means is your product treats the solid and liquid, but you can buy any off-the-shelf front end like the toilet bowl, or the squat pan, where your technology beauty comes in, the magic comes in from the back end only. So with 3500, that's how it's been categorized. Or if you're a single unit that comprises of the front end and back end, that's all the testing requirements you need. That means you declare that, hey, my unit, I have a front end and it's attached to my back end. So I certify that as one product. And 3500 requirements are broken down in basically 3 categories. We have document checks, control lab testing, and field testing. So this 7 parameters that you can see here belongs to the control lab testing. And I'll go through very quickly what each of them entail. So for example, in mechanical requirements, we are looking at, the standard is asking us to test for visibility of feces, how effective your toilet evacuate the feces, the evacuation performance, the integrity against external impact, slip, trip, and falling, and tightness test. So these are some of the parameters that comes under mechanical requirements. In the environmental parameters, we look at COD, TSS, total dissolved solids, total nitrogen, total phosphorus, and pH. And under the human health parameters, so there's no, I'm talking through it, Ron. I'm just talking through it. There's no other slides for those, but I'm giving examples of the parameters. Yeah. So in the human health, we look at Clostridium, we look at bacterial, we look at helminth. Those are some of the examples. And the other 2 things I wanted to share is air emission, noise and odor. We measure them from within inside of the unit, if you have a superstructure, and also outside. So these are some of the examples of each of the category, what are being tested. Next slide, please. So I want to share a short video that is available on TUSUD website to give an overview of 3500. Could you help me play the video, please? It's about 3 minutes long, and it's me. Manufacturers on different types of sanitation technologies. The standard can be broken down into 3 main parts: document check, control lab testing,
and field verification of performance. The first component to meet the certification of the standard is to comply with the required document checks. The second portion of the ISO 30500 is controlled lab testing. The lab testing involves a test sequence of minimum 32 days with a prescribed loading pattern. The aim of this segment is to ensure the reliability of the unit tested under a strict set of conditions. Last but not least, field testing is required to ensure that the system is robust in real-world conditions. The following segment shows a recent testing in Durban, South Africa.
For this round of field testing, we'll be doing a series of tests for human health and environmental parameters on the EcoSun eSync unit.
Depending on the type of system, these tests are to be carried out weekly over a course of up to 5 months. This validation work has given TÜV invaluable knowledge on testing out the new standard, and for manufacturers, an opportunity to test for certification readiness.
Thank you for the video. So TÜV has conducted over a period of 5-6 years on different locations, primarily in South Africa and in China on different technology types. So we have accumulated quite a number of field testing experience and knowledge, and these are some of the things that we'll be sharing in the next in-depth webinar series to come. So with that, I have completed to give an overview of ISO 3500. The next topic I want to move to is ISO 31800. It's a fecal sludge treatment unit, FSTU we call it for short. Click, please. Another click. Thank you. As Sun had mentioned earlier, this FSTU, there are some criteria for it to be qualified as FSTU. The key thing is it has to be energy independent when the unit is running at steady state, and also it has to recover resource from the input. Next slide, please. ISO 3800 overview. So in the introduction to ISO 3800, the target audience for 31800 are a lot of places where there are, I would say, pit latrines, household latrines, where it's not connected to sewer. And the real objective is to make sure that there is a safe place, there's a place for the vacuum trucks the vacuum truck to dispose of, to discharge the fecal sludge into a fecal sludge treatment unit for processing. And the technical requirements for 31800 includes performance testing, safety testing, the operability, and the maintainability. Some of the product literature that we require from the manufacturers are the operation and maintenance of the fecal sludge treatment unit. And I also mentioned earlier before, the energy independence is one of the key aspects of FSTU. And last but not least, the performance testing for human health, environment, air emission, odor, and noise are all also part of the requirements of the standard. Next, please. So for 31800, it has to be energy independent, I said earlier before, prefabricated, and has to serve a large community. Okay, next slide. The technical requirements in the standard, we look at the downtime and uptime. So the maximum technical availability of FSTU is important. I'm hearing some feedback. Okay, thank you. That's really important for a big machine to be running. At least if it's not 24 hours, it has to have a maximum technical availability. And for safety, a heads up. I'm still hearing feedback. Okay, thank you. It is really important while operating such a big machine that a heads up risk assessment is done properly, and the mechanical and electrical safety is put into place. And also the operability of the unit and how easily it can be maintained is also a key success implementation criteria. Next slide, please. So in the standard, we also talk about the sustainability, right? Because one of the key requirements, it has to recover resources. And so we do look at how much emission of CO2 emission the FSTU produce, and what are the resource recovered from this machine, from this unit. Next slide, please. The energy independence assessment, as I mentioned earlier, it has to operate in an off-grid environment at a steady state without relying on external energy sources, apart from the input of fecal sludge. So what that means is, while you're starting up the machine, you are allowed to plug into a grid, to a power source, but once it starts to operate, it has to use the energy that is generated from the unit itself to power the whole operation. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for underperformance testing, for human health, the performance testing are quite similar. Some of the requirements are quite similar to ISO 3500. Under the human health parameters, we do test for bacteria, protozoa, virus, and helminths. And for the environmental parameters, BOD, COD, pH, temperature, total nitrogen, phosphorus, TSS, and trace elements. And BOD was not tested for ISO 3500, but it can be found in ISO 31800. And for air emission parameters, it's a lot more stricter than the household toilet unit. So we look at dioxins and furans and arsenic and mercury and moisture content. So for acoustic, and because it's such a big unit, we also have stricter requirements for noise. We also have the odor testing, which is also found in ISO 3500. Next slide, please. To give you an idea how some of this innovative sanitation technology looks like, to your left I've taken this photo a couple of months ago in South Africa. So this is a back-end only treatment unit. It's attached to, it's serving a school in Johannesburg. So the input comes from an ablution block of toilets that serve the students, and it's pumped into the back-end treatment system. As you can see, we have to climb up a flight of stairs. And so the settling tank, the anaerobic digestion, and all those stuff take place in these two tanks. What comes out from this system is a very clear effluent water, liquid, which is then pumped back into the school toilet system and use it for flushing. Since the system was installed in the school, it actually saved the school a lot of money in terms of water, and South Africa has a shortage of water supply as well. The other type of technology is the FSTU, and one good example is the Cedron V2 installed in Dakar in Senegal. Is the photo doesn't quite capture the size of it, but you can see it's really a treatment. It's really a plant, and yeah. So this is my last slide, and I want to share more about some of the challenges. Just very quickly, some of the challenges I think people will be interested to know is when we did testing for South Africa, well, not just for South Africa, for ISO 3500. One of the key challenges for us is to have a site big enough for installing the treatment unit, and also procure enough inputs, which is urine and feces, to test the system for at least 32 days. So with that, next slide, please. I thank everybody for staying on the call and for giving me the opportunity to share. On the TUSUP website, we have quite a number of free resources, the webinars for 3500 and 31800, and other materials as well. We are here to support manufacturers or even labs. If you have any questions about the technicality of how we conduct some testing, please feel free to approach me. So thank you very much. That's all my sharing for tonight.
Thank you, May. I think excellent presentation in terms of how the ISO standards are brought into practice. I can see some of the chats, and my good old friend Jonathan Parkinson has been very active, and Jonathan has been asking lots of questions about, and I think Leslie did respond to him in terms of SDG links to ISO. Now, and I think this is the question to you. How much does the monitoring and regulation and the adoption of ISO standard prove to be a challenge in countries where there is a lack of capacity or lack of resources? So May, you want to answer that, or Mr. Sun Kim, would you like to take that up? Sun Kim, go ahead, and then we'll come to Mike.
I'll go and jump in, and May and others can join in who have more practical experience. But the reality of it is, it can be a challenge because there are resources and costs involved in all aspects, including national adoption. But I'll use two examples. One is South Africa, and the other one is the US, actually. So in South Africa, the national government, the federal government, is pushing for solutions for their citizens, because there is a wholesale issue, especially in the informal settlements. So the national government is investing. There are a lot of other NGOs and as well as companies investing in making this a reality. So in South Africa, they've nationally adopted ISO 30500, as a South Africa national standard 30500. They have they built it into their building regulations. So ISO 30500 compliant systems are acceptable legal solutions to pit latrines, pale latrines, and other non-sewer sanitation systems. And I can guarantee you, knowing what I know about ISO 30500 compliant systems, if they're affordable, will be much better options from a initial cost, but also from a maintenance perspective and life perspective than any of the other solutions that are the alternate solutions. In the U.S., the U.S. and Canada has nationally adopted ISO 30500. And unfortunately, the U.S., it's the federal government versus the state and the local counties and cities. It's all very segmented. But the model codes, plumbing and building codes for 2024 has been implemented so that ISO 30500 compliant systems would be acceptable. Now, if the states and local governments need to now adopt this, so it'll be very segmented. But so those are two examples. There is a cost, but people have to realize holistically what is the cost of not solving at a global level this significant and enduring and horrific situation. So I'll stop with my preaching here, but there is a cost if you don't do anything. So yeah. So thank you.
You want to jump in here?
Yeah, I think I don't have anything else to add. I think Sun covered it pretty well.
Okay.
Yeah.
But while you are there have been a couple of questions on the chat in terms of like Heidi saying, I have a product and how do I get it, endorsed? And there are some couple of other questions. So,
okay,
do we all have to come to only TUV, or are there other agencies or organizations that do this certification?
Yeah. I would say because ISO 3500 was published a few years ago in 2018. It's relatively a new standard, and also the industry, the NSS industry, is still up and coming. Besides TUSUD, I don't know any other testing inspection company that has created an international mark for the product. Not that I know of. Maybe that's just my limitation. The reason being that is I can share from a TIC's perspective. They may be slow in setting up a certification scheme for 3500 is because there's not a strong pipeline of NSS system waiting to be certified. For example, if it's a mobile phone and mobile phone needs to be certified to some IEC standard, every TIC company will have come out with the mark already because there's a mass market for that. So in that regard, you can still go to other testing inspection organization. They may not be able to give you a international product mark that you can put on your product because they haven't developed the scheme yet, but they can definitely do partial testing for you. If you say, hey, can you help me do testing for the environmental parameters? They can certainly do that for you. But for TUSUD, we have a structured process to help manufacturers get to the ISO 3500 certification. You may have guessed it by now, it's a very lengthy process and there are many parameters to be tested. As such, we developed an assessment tool. It's called the SRI, STRI for short, or the Sanitation Readiness Index. So what this tool does is we lifted all the requirements from the standard and put it into like a questionnaire framework. So as a manufacturer, you can go in and answer those questions and get an assessment, a report that comes out and see how far your proximity to meeting the requirements of the standard. Now, I understand from a few companies or institutions that we've been working with, everybody has done certain level of testing of the ISO 3500. It could be environmental, it could be the other mechanical, but because they don't have a structured process to assess how close they are to meeting the standard, if they go straight for certification, they come to TUSUD and say, I want to go for the full certification. Most likely, because your technology is quite new and you may waste time and money, you may not pass because it's not a mature industry. So for TUSUD, I think you can come to us and we have a structured process to take you through. Yeah.
Thank you. I can see a lot of hands raised. Please ask your questions if you have any or comments in the chat, because otherwise it will be difficult to manage. Except in the webinar hall, I believe there is no system for putting the question to chat. So somebody from the webinar hall, maybe
yes, I'm here.
Take a microphone and speak out.
So I think, yeah, we have a question from the webinar hall. Suman, over to you.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
My question is to Santi. So I saw in the ISO 30500, it says about the new technology and solutions. But again, you also mentioned that it should be technology neutral. So I'm a bit confused. So can you please explain with any example that how can it be a new technology under 30500 and at the meantime it is also technology neutral? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that question was to me. So I think if I understood the question, the idea of being technology neutral versus being new technology, is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, that was the question.
Right. So what's meant by being technology neutral is that the standard does not prescribe a specific technology. For example, so a lot of the technologies that I'm aware of, and I'm only aware of certain sections, parts of it, and TUSUD is testing and is aware of certain ones as well. There's a combination. There's some biological systems, thermal systems. There's filtration systems. There's a number of different systems. And any one of those in combination, as long as it meets the performance requirements of ISO 30500, could be found to be compliant. So that's what's meant by technology neutral. Now, are there existing systems that could meet it? There actually in Brazil, there's a company called Tigre who actually were developing their own system. And it turns out their system, we believe, is pretty close to being fully compliant. Now, you won't really know until you actually do the testing. So there's an example of there are companies working on systems really to address the pathogen question and the environmental question. And while we're here, I do see one question related to testing in situ. So in situ systems. So here's the deal. The cost to do a full ISO 30500 certification, just the testing, will probably be quite expensive. And the only way it would make sense is if the testing is done to a product that will be built in thousands and hundreds of thousands. And that's the only way to really get the cost down. So imagine if you were asked, Mei mentioned about a cell phone. Imagine somebody asked you to create a cell phone, not with all the web capabilities, the supercomputers that we all carry in our pockets nowadays or purses. If somebody asked you to build one of those from scratch, in situ, it would be horrendously expensive first to build it and then to test it to all of the ITT and all of the all of the ITU and all of the requirements. So building in situ by definition is and trying to test it because you cannot replicate it would be problematic. So that's the idea of building a factory built, fully built system, minimally built out in situ. And so that's the idea. And this is going to be a threefer. When Mei was talking about the cost and the fact that we're right now in this transition. So ISO 30500 and low-cost products that anyone can afford, any households could afford, even the very poor and informal settlements, can only happen when there's a mature market. Versus at the beginning when, you know, the dream of the future toilets, and we're right now really in that transition. And we need to get through this transition, and it's through many of the partners that are on this call and hosting this call, as well as many others, that the mature market will be realized. But until that happens, you know, you won't have other test, inspection, certification organizations really jump in because they need to see a business case. And so this will ultimately only be able to replicate and sustain itself if there is, in fact, an economic driver. There's the huge need, you know, everybody wants a good, clean, flushable toilet that doesn't pollute. So the need is there, but also the supply chain and the development that all needs to be in place. And you know, the only way people can actually address poverty is when economic activity really supports everyone's livelihood. So this is all part and parcel to that. So thank you.
Yeah, just a related question, and maybe anyone else can take up, Leslie or Jyotiji. There is this question on the chat saying what May presented were all the fabricated units in terms of whether it was the toilet or even the FSTP or the treatment unit. Now, if there are not prefabricated units but various components put together that can meet the standard 31800 or 30500 for the toilet, would that get the certification? Because just we're going back that we are saying the standards are technology neutral as long as the performances are met. So whether it's an assembled product or a one big box, would that meet the standards? Maybe Jyotiji or anyone else who wants to answer.
So let me tell one thing. So you're making standards and the certification thing are quite that is independent things, independent process. So standard as a document standard we can use for the many purposes except certification. Certification is the one of our purpose. So for the certification process in our practice we made a STI, that is a scheme for testing and inspection. On the basis of that STI we are gonna made a certification process. So we do not need to test each and everything during the certification process. Yes, we do the major test for the certification and some test from the supplier certificate, and some are the type test which can show us the properties of the raw material and so on. So by the combination of different things we certify the product.
Leslie, you want to come in here and your reaction to this? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think I have anything else to add on this question.
Okay, fine. Great. And Dr. Shankar, I know that you're at IIT Palakkad, you've been doing some testing certification. So what is the experience there, or so would you like to share some of that?
So we have started testing, but we haven't started certifying. We're trying to put in place a complete testing protocol with learning from Tutsud and other people all across the world to understand what is it that can meet Indian standards, that can meet what our requirements are. First, only for India, and then we go on to for the world. So we're still in the process.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now that brings me, Leslie, this certification, I know for other ISO standards like 9,000, 16,000, which are very, very popular. There are agencies that are quote unquote certifiers. They are approved by ISO saying that they will go to the place and say, yes, we say that you are certified. So what is that process? Who gets to do the testing? Who gets to do the certification? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, there's actually a number of stakeholders involved, as you mentioned, and ISO is just the place where the first step takes place, the development of the standard. There could be test methods included in a standard or other reference points for certification activities to be completed later on. But and then ISO has a separate suite of standards that are just for certification bodies to follow. And the stakeholder that comes into play after the standard is published and the certification bodies have developed the scheme in the way that Mei has described is accreditation bodies. And certification bodies such as Tutsud and others are accredited by organizations so that they meet the international standards, mostly developed by ISO and IEC for them to follow. So there's multiple layers. If you think of the product being tested or certified, the product is developed by a manufacturer to meet a standard, and then it is tested by an outside body. That test is used to form a certification, and the certification body may be accredited. So those are the multiple layers of confidence that are given in the system.
Great. So
one more point. Can I add one point?
Yeah, Dr. Shankar, please go ahead.
Yeah, so there is also the question of the particular country or state imposing some pollution control norms or other norms and standards, building standards or whatever, which you might have to adhere to in addition to the ISO standards and whatever standards that the country has adopted, country or state has. That also has to be taken care of. Thank you.
Great. I think we have, I don't see many more questions on the chat. We seem to have responded to all of this. And as we said that we will do the deep dive of 30500 in our next webinar that will take place roughly a month from now. We will figure out a date and again give you all the message related to that. I want to give these last few minutes to each of our presenters if you want to add something, and we'll go in the reverse order. So Mai, we'll start from you. You have any final words, final thoughts on the webinar today and what is to come? So please.
Thank you. Thanks for the stage. I would say today is really a very high level introduction by all of us, and if you really want to find out more from a technical perspective, please join the next deep dive where we go into real details of the content inside 3500 and 31800. Thank you.
Okay, good advertisement for our next webinar. Thank you. Jyoti ji, would you like to say something?
Yeah, thank you for arranging this webinar. So just I wanted to say that putting a standard on the place that is making a standard is a milestone, that when we have a standard, we can find the way to certify it. So standards can be used in many ways. Without certification, we can use it as a for the specification purpose. So I think this is a milestone to have a standard in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. So,
Yeah, I would say two quick things. Number one, both TwoSued and ANSI has their respective websites that has just tremendous amount of information. So I would really encourage everyone interested in this topic to go to those websites and review those. And really, you know, what I would like to I would like to thank everyone that's participating in this webinar and hosting this webinar and present it, as well as so many others that are working together to really make a big impact. It is really through our shared efforts that that the world in the future will be so much better. It will. I'm just so excited that you know, the ISO standard is just one small element of the bigger picture. And so thank you for your interest, and I look forward to subsequent webinars. Thank you.
thank you, Sonke. Leslie.
Thank you again to the organizers and to all of you who participated today. I would echo Sun's statement that it's really inspiring to see such engagement and good interest in these standards, and more importantly in this sector, and how the standards can support further development. Thank you, Sun, also for plugging our website again. And I would encourage, there's lots of materials on there if anyone has more questions. And lastly, as I mentioned, ISO is a network of standards bodies. So in your country, you can get involved through your national member body. And I encourage you to get connected there, take part nationally in any activities you can. And that's another thing, that if you need trouble or have trouble finding the contact information, feel free to reach out to me, and Nancy can help.
Thank you, Leslie. Dr. Shankar, on behalf of the organizers, would you like to say something?
Thank you very much. It's heartening to see so many people across the world joining this webinar, and interest in sanitation per se is always like a taboo subject, at least in India. So it's heartening to see a crowd. And I think CWAS has done, Asim and his team have done a wonderful job organizing this. Thank you.
Okay.
Look forward to the remaining sessions as well.
Yeah, thank you. Is Roshan around, Asim?
No, he just had to leave for another meeting actually, so he left.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you, and on behalf of the CWAS-CRDF-CEPT University, I thank all the presenters for wonderful work. And as you can see on the chat, a lot of demand for your presentation. So we will get your concurrence very soon, and then find a way to reach out to all the participants and how we can share the presentation. At CWAS, our team, Asim, Jigisha, and others have worked hard to put this together, and also our social media expert who sort of been at it for a long time. And thanks to them, we had almost 150 people listening to this webinar, and that's, given the webinar fatigue, I think it's an excellent number of people to have that. So thank you all, thank you the participants, presenters, and wait for our next announcement for the next deep dive into the ISO 35. Thank you all. Have a good day, good night, good evening, wherever you are. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much.